right. Okay, I actually had pre-recorded my slides, but it's okay. Let's go live. Okay, so thank you for listening in. So today I'll be just talking briefly 20 minutes on monkey guarding, an integrated approach for a city in nature, essentially Singapore. So I represent the Jingrao Institute Singapore, and we are part of the Singapore Long-tailed Macaque Working Group. So before anything, well, Singapore, we've evolved. Up until last year, we've changed into a city in nature. So essentially, the whole point is to ensure generations of Singapore they have green, livable, and sustainable homes. But of course, we are such a small country. There is an increase in overlap with the wildlife ranging space as well as the human ranging space. So, the topic of whether humans and wildlife can coexist is always hot, right? People are always talking about it, and you know. More and more, we have more human wildlife interfaces, not just for macaques, but also with animals such as the wild boar and then like pythons and as well as the otters, which is actually Singapore's iconic species, right? So today, obviously, my focus will be on the long-tailed macaque, but this is just a bit of background info. We have actually three main primate species in Singapore. We have the Sunda solaris, the long-tailed macaques, and the Raffles banded langur. I put the dusky langur here because, interestingly, in late 2019, three adult male dusky langurs made their way to Singapore. We believe them to be from Johor. Two of them actually survive and they are very comfortable living in Singapore and not showing any signs of detrimental impacts on our local species. Yeah, so anyway, moving on. So the macaques are generally found in the heart of Singapore where we call it the Central Catchment Nature Reserve. We do have scatters of them, now even more so with how fragmented the country is. So in Singapore, we have a law in states that you're not supposed to feed wildlife, especially for the monkeys, because if you are caught, you will be fined. But however, there are flaws and opportunities where people do feed or indirectly feed these macaques, right? So it's in the news. Everyone knows that feeding wildlife is a major reason why there's a rise in the number of wild animal numbers, but partly why there's a spike in the number of animal numbers over the years is also because there's more hotlines for people to call, whether it's for the national parks boards or wildlife rescue group like ACRES or town councils or even the police. So all these do sort of like lead to an increase in the number, and especially for macaques, especially for transient individuals. If a residential estate has like only two transient macaques that are just moving back and forth, but like three residents sees the two monkeys at different timings of the day, it suddenly reports as six monkeys within the estate. So all these little things do add up to the wild the numbers rising, right? So the issue with macaques and human feeding occurs way back in 1970s. So we have a botanical garden where there used to be troops of macaques there, but because of the association of human to food and they are losing their natural fear towards people, back then the approach was to just remove these monkeys, essentially to cull. We do not have a buffer area to release this problem monkey, so unfortunately all of them are culled. And till this date, up until 2015, this approach of every time there's a problem or a conflict, the monkeys are being raided or culled, and it doesn't actually solve at all. And one third of the population was culled all the way in 2015, which is an alarming numbers. So it doesn't actually address the problem because we have news like this appearing every now and then in the newspaper, and photos of macaques sitting on a bin or eating potato chips doesn't actually do good, especially through the public perception. And in a world of social media, people are greatly influenced by what they see or what they hear rather than what they essentially experience. So all these create this unnecessary fear of perception towards macaques and wild animals. So John Shah did an island-wide study, which is ongoing to date, to understand what's the main cause of interaction. So the main bulk of it is due to food. There's always a small percentage of no clear human influence, and there's also a certain percentage of human provocation. We also wanted to understand why people believe that macaques harass them. So generally, people do understand that they are attracted to our food. So with all this information, that was where in 2014 we did a pilot project in one of the forests, which is called the Bukit Timah Nature Reserve, working with 6 different residential estates which borders the forest. So within that forest, there's approximately around 5 different groups of macaques, but there is one particular main group that is often seen overlapping in space with all these residential areas. So we did a pilot project for 1 year. So I'm just going to briefly go through this. The whole objective of monkey guarding is to create this safe and healthy barrier between people and the macaques. It is not targeted to eliminate the sightings of the macaques, and it is essentially a skill-based thing that we want people to be equipped with, so that they know what to do if they see the macaques, skills to coexist with the macaques, and also there are some scenarios where they just don't need to react at all, right? There are, of course, tools that we use sometimes to assist with monkey guarding, and this could be hiking sticks or umbrellas. They act as your extended arms. They're not meant to hit or taunt the monkeys. Only those who go through the process of monkey guarding will be able to use these tools, because if you use the tools in a wrong manner, it can actually backfire and allow the macaques to actually act in defense. So a bit of theory here. These are the common mitigation steps that we use. Of course, no one size fits all. We do alter accordingly based on the people perception, macaques, as well as the environment. So essentially, we do a little bit of a research base before we do the guarding. So we identify the troop and as well as the hotspot areas. So troop may not necessarily be the entire troop. We do identify the key individuals in the group. It could be the alpha male and his scouts. And then next we will identify the attractants. Sometimes it could be the bin center, which is present, but then it's not managed properly. Most of the cases, sometimes if we are able to identify the attractants, there's actually no need for monkey guarding at all, because the monkeys after a while don't visit the place anymore. But if the problem persists, then we start to kind of observe the movement patterns of the macaques, because they have routines, right? They wake up in a certain area, they move to a certain area and timings, so that we know where do our efforts come in. And then it is very important that we know where to guide them to. Of course, there are scenarios where you can't apply monkey guarding at all, when there's no green space or sufficient carrying capacity. The thing is, we identifying the area to guide them to is one, but we need to make sure that we don't end up pushing them to another residential area or another hotspot areas, right? And then lastly, that's where we will begin guarding. So that's like the last approach before we really want to take that approach. There are other interventions, for example, that we can also apply monkey guarding, and that is when there's an injured macaques or there are roadkills and etc., which I will cover more in details during the workshop. Okay. So the whole process of monkey guarding doesn't revolve just about macaque, because you want to make it a very holistic approach. So it always targets the people, macaque, and environment, the 3 main aspects. So before anything, we need to identify from the people's aspect what are the potential risks present or not. So what are the risks that's facing the different age group, whether it's a senior resident, a working adult, a school kid, anything like that. We also need to understand the tolerance level of the residential area or the area that's a hotspot, because this is where we determine how much effort do we put in. Some areas, they are just not comfortable with macaques entering their unit, and that's where we provide a more targeted assistance. Some areas, they just need more education or brochure or educational talks, then that's where our approach goes towards there. Early intervention has actually helped us a lot in our work, because instead of waiting for incidences to happen, we are able to preempt or intervene. For example, a new residential area is going to be up and it's close to nature reserve. That's where we come in and we offer to do talks and education. It is very important that we provide targeted assistance. It's not just like ABC, because everyone is different, every macaque is different, every environment is different. So in a way, the assistance is very, very targeted. The environment aspect, of course, we also identify the attractants, whether there's natural or unnatural food spot. Hotspot is also one important factor. So especially during fruiting seasons, or sometimes we have like public holidays, where more people visit the parks. Especially now with COVID, more people are visiting our park, more people are utilizing all the green space. So essentially, it is a big hotspot. Developments is something which is a challenge in Singapore because it is constantly going on. This involves a lot of engagement with a lot of nature groups and agencies to ensure that there's a sustainable space for people and the wild animals, and also knowing that there's a safe green space for these animals. The last component will, of course, be the macaques. So this is where sometimes we tie in onto researchers or undergrad to help us do this work. So identifying the troop movements, the individual, whether there's necessity to put any GPS coloring, types of interactions. So we do have like a score sheet to understand on the level of like 0 to 5, how comfortable or fearful are they towards people. And just like human aspect, there's also early intervention for macaques as well as intervention. So I'm just going to play this very short video just for you to have a gist of what monkey guarding is. All right. I'm sorry there was supposed to be sound to it, but all right, hope you bear with me. So after we did the pilot program for 1 year, we did manage to get buy-in support, and people do see that this approach is actually a little bit more sustainable than the approach of just culling and removing the monkeys and so on and so forth. Of course, that being said, it is intense. It is a lot of resource, a lot of manpower needed. but then it worked. So that was where we started to feel like, let's start to train the community to be monkey guards, because we were training the security guards as like the first line of defense, right? So in 2018, we moved on to another residential area in a closer nature reserve where we trained to be a monkey guard. So this was a pilot project that was we received funding, so it was great. We have more manpower, more volunteers coming in, so the complaints will definitely start to dip after a while, but it has to be an integrated approach, because people always say that it was monkey guarding, like does it work on its own? It cannot work on its own, because there's no point us trying to deter the monkeys but people are not doing their part, to keep their home monkey proof and so on and so forth. So, it's been going on for years. Monkey guarding has evolved over time because of the change in the perception of people, the environment, and the macaques. But there are, of course, scenarios where monkey guarding is definitely not applicable. So, number one is when there's no sustainable green space or carrying capacity. This can be a bit tricky, especially when we're talking about transient macaques, the male ones that are moving around naturally, because we are trying to teach the people in Singapore that as we move towards a city in nature, seeing wildlife is going to be a norm. But then again, we have to find a nice balance where if you see a transient macaque, it is okay to leave them alone, don't feed them, and they will move away. But when there's no sustainable green space, there is that pressure within the macaque working group, like how long do we let this macaque be around until a complaint comes up. So I will discuss this more in the workshop aspect, but if you have questions, you can just let me know. The second point will be on injured macaques that require intervention. So this obviously is more directed, that we don't need to do monkey guarding. Unfortunately, this is very rare, but if there's instances of direct contact or biting incidences, that's where approaches which are undesirable will come in. But this is usually the very, very last one. Okay, there's a lot of challenges that we face with monkey guarding, but the main three common ones that we get is the buy-in support. So even though sometimes we do get support from the community or from the agency that's okay to proceed with the monkey guarding, but sometimes all it takes is sometimes someone feed the macaque, or someone gets very agitated. It seems like the clock has to restart again. And sometimes in the process of that, people get agitated. And this ties in with factor number 2, where they want a quick fix solution. And that's where we lose the support. So it seems like we have to work on the whole process once again. And number 3, I think it's something that a lot of us face, which is a shortage of manpower and resources, as well as retaining and sustaining volunteers that we've trained as well. Okay. Of course, all these efforts is further solidified when there's a campaign that was launched in 2019, where our Minister of Social and Family Development launched this campaign of not feeding the long-tail macaque. So this actually helps with our effort a lot. Accompanying that was in 2020, there's a Wildlife Act that is being amended, where all wildlife is now protected in Singapore. So it's not like specific wildlife only. And of course, along with it is the feeding fine and the trapping and illegal trade and stuff and so on. And of course, last year, when the macaques status was elevated to vulnerable, this further proves to the community that we need to really work together to help the macaques. So what actually worked a lot that has helped us greatly over the years is the formation of a long-term macaque working group in Singapore. So instead of scattered efforts, what we do is we come together and we tap onto individual strength. So the working group represents the government agency, the NGOs, from the research aspect, and we come together. The whole point of us having a working group is for us to come together and talk about difficult scenarios and find solutions that can help both the community and the macaques as well. So what we do is we provide trainings and monkey guards training as well within the working group, and as well as external vendors. And these trainings are very important in a sense that it has to be standardized and it's not very scattered, right? Over the years, like Manda Wildlife Group, which I've trained for monkey guards, they've come up with innovative ways with canine patrol, basically to get the dogs to amplify the efforts for monkey guarding. So I'm just going to play a short video. So even though the golden retriever looks very, very cute, but one thing we need to note is the golden retriever, the dog, should not replace the position of a monkey guard. A monkey guard has to be there and still stand between the dog and the macaque. So of course there are some challenges faced, but this is just some examples that can be done, right? And up until recently, we've started to do this program called Train the Trainer. So we start to train people with the potential to be monkey guardians to become the people to train more monkey guards. So in a way, we have more people with the right skills to provide this training. Joint visits is something that we are very, very big on. So as a working group, we conduct joint visits for areas that require assistance. So it's more balanced and holistic. And one thing that we felt has worked is when we conduct talks, we don't just focus on the topic of macaques, because we only you tend to attract the more angry people to attend these talks. So usually when we present the talk, like say title living with your wild neighbors, we have a nice balance of people coming in. So we get to tap onto the support of people who are neutral or okay with wildlife, to help with those people who have a different perception as well, right? The targeted trainings and talks for residents is something that we also are very big on, because we know that there are specific needs that the residents need. Simple things that we provide for residents to help our efforts is also managing trash bins. So for example, the use of bungee cord goes a long way. Just bring this short video quickly. So this is something that we've shared with a lot of the community, and it has worked. But human habits, sometimes it just strikes back. Sometimes all it takes is like one person to forget to latch it back, and then the whole cycle starts again, right? We work with agencies to also constantly change bins to more monkey-proof bins to curb potential hotspots, and this also helps to curb the potential of wildlife roadkills as well, because some of these bins are placed right smack at the side of expressways and roads. Brochures with collaborated efforts. So instead of a lot of educational information, we come together and we create bite-sized information for people, and it has information from macaque behavior from nature reserve, forest fringes, park into residential estate. One thing we also know that work is advisories must evolve with change in the community and the environment, right? And then the main focus is we want to empower the community to empower another community. So basically, Singaporeans are very vocal. We like to write into the news. So this is actually a great opportunity for us to create change, where there's a spark in conversation that goes on. Over the years, we've seen a lighter perception towards macaques. So like this was shown in our newspaper, where people started to show or display macaques in a more lighter manner. Guided monkey walks is something that the Jingao Institute does to bring people to see macaques, understand them without the need for direct contact. School talks are targeted near wildlife hotspot areas. And we're big on citizen science, because we know that it can't be just the nature groups doing the work. We need to tap onto the future nature stewards. And all in all, everything is definitely backed by science, so that again, everything is more balanced and holistic. At the end of the day, we have to make sure that we have a good working relationship with the ministers, especially if you want to push for a policy change, or especially in areas where we need a more upper hand approach or assistance from them. I'll leave my presentation with this, basically how urbanized Singapore is learning to live with its wildlife. Well, personally for me, I think it has evolved, it has improved over time, but there's definitely a lot of work to be done. We're so urbanized, we have so many working groups, whether it's from macaque to wild boars to snakes and so on and so forth. We're all learning from each other as much as we're also learning from the needs of the community and the change in the environment. All right, so I'll just end it here. Thank you very much, everyone.